All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ebony. As I mentioned to you before, this is my second time meeting you. I met you in a book club where we read and discussed Love Radio. And for me, it was such a beautiful book at the time. And the bookstore date that everyone, I'm sure, talks to you about is my favorite thing I've ever read in the world. I think about it often, to be very honest. And for those that aren't aware of your background, you also used to work in publishing.
Yeah.
Right? What was it like for you to work in publishing while also writing Love Radio?
It was a funny process because publishing, I've mentioned this a few times. I think it's better now, but when I first got into publishing, you didn't tell people that you wanted to write. It was just one of those.
Really?
It was a very weird thing that was not discussed but discussed. You knew walking in, because the assumption was if you're coming into this job and you're trying to be a published author, then you're trying to use everybody. I'm assuming that's what the feelings are, that you can't separate or whatever. I don't know.
That's really limiting, I would say.
It does, because it's an industry that if I'm being real, I think that a lot of people who work in the industry secretly want to be writers.
I agree.
And I think for whatever reasons, maybe their career switched, maybe they couldn't get their book published. I'm not sure, but I do find it, I don't know, I just always found it weird that anytime I would mention it, it was you could tell it's people would be turned off by it. And so I stopped. And so I had a couple friends, one, Cericia Fennell, who has a couple books now, which I can't believe I can say because I've known her since SNS days.
Yeah.
She was one of the people who understood immediately that I was interested in writing. And so we were sort of each other's accountability partners. And then as I moved into the industry, I found more people like that. So by the time I was ready to actually sit down and write this, I was at HarperCollins. I was working with a lot of YA authors at the time, and I just still in the morning before I would get up to go to work, I would write for an hour, and then I would get on a train and go right to the job. And then COVID happened, and I wrote a chunk of this in COVID. And so once COVID happened, and all of New York was shut down, I ended up moving for a few months to Virginia, and I just spent that time writing to kind of keep myself sane. Yeah.
I left New York during COVID too.
Yeah.
But it wasn't because of COVID. It just kind of happened coincidentally.
Yeah.
What a terrible time. What a terrible time.
Yes.
But, you mentioned that you worked with YA authors. What was your role?
So I was a marketing director. That was my job at Harper, and then I got a marketing director job at Penguin Random House, and that was my last sort of publishing job until I took my sabbatical, which I like to call an extended sabbatical.
It's pretty extended.
Listen, I'm going to keep extending it for as long as I can. And if I go back to work, I go back to work. But it's been kind of fun, kind of challenging myself to see how long can I take this well-deserved break? But yeah, I worked, I started at Harper as a senior marketing manager. And then I was able to move up. And before I left, I was the marketing head for all of the YA books there. So,
wow.
Yeah.
I mean, so many people hearing this, even myself, that seems like the dream almost, to know that you're able to work with a specific demographic and be the head of it. Do you ever miss that role?
That's a really good question. It's a good question because I haven't actually thought of that. Do I actually miss it? I will say there's a lot about publishing I don't miss, and I think being in the roles that I was before I left, what I realized was there was so much that I got accomplished. Being in that role, particularly working in YA, I love working. I would like working in children's because, the conversations are constantly being pushed to whether we want them to be or not from our audience. And so I was able to be a lot more creative with things. And so that was really when I felt like I had the chops and the freedom to kind of do things that I had never done before. But even still, I realized that I had limits. And the next stage of things that I wanted to do, in my career, for community, for all those things, I couldn't do there.
Yeah.
And so I think for that reason, it made it easy. And then also you're just in all of the roles, you're dealing with office politics. You're dealing with heads who feel like they know way more things than you do, even though like there are people who are like literally on the ground doing the work. Not even just me. Like at the point when I became a marketing director, you know, there was a team under me. And so they were the ones in the day to day. And there were things that if I didn't know, they reminded me, you know, and that's how it's supposed to be.
Right.
But yeah, I think I just got tired of office politics. And then there's also just being a Black woman. And for as many strides as I took, there was a lot of fighting I had to do to get there. Yeah. And so it was just the exhaustion of like constantly having to prove yourself in big or small ways. Yeah. I just wanted to break from that.
No, I definitely get that. And I think, you know, again, hearing that you were able to kind of get to the head position, right? My immediate thought was like, did you face any doubts and beliefs within yourself in being in that role, knowing that you did have to kind of fight every day? And you're fighting so many different things, of course, every day.
I mean, absolutely. I think one of the things that I've just learned as a manager is that we all have strengths. And so one of the things that I always felt confident in my capabilities is the things that I know very well. And so I really leaned into those things. Yeah. And anytime someone tried to like, you know, mark something that I didn't do the way that they expected me to do, I would kindly remind them of the 12 things that I did do that day that were significant and how this thing is so minor. But you realize it's really just people trying to like project their feelings of like insignificance, or it's someone just needing to like, you know, like micromanage your work to make themselves feel better. And there were so many people like that in publishing that like by the time I got into that role, I'm like, all right, who else is coming? Like, let's go, you know? And I knew how to be professional, but I also knew how to stand my ground. So I don't know, it was weird. I think it was one of those things where it was like publishing was sort of like this initiation into this very interesting society where you have to figure out how to navigate it. And I had figured it out at that point. And so it was more of like, all right, this is what it is. Yeah.
What were the things that you felt like you needed to learn before taking that leap?
In terms of like that role or?
Into writing.
Oh, into writing? Oh, this is a good question. So I needed to learn that part. So for as confident as I was being like a marketing director, as a writer, I was so scared. Like the idea that I am putting my whole heart into something and that people could just hate it. Yeah. Because I wasn't there like as a writer. I always questioned whether or not like I was at the point where I could take the leap. And I think because I worked on so many books by incredible writers, there was always this thing of like, oh, Ebony, you'll never get like this. You'll never get like that. You'll never get like that. And so I really had to unlearn that. Like I had to unlearn all these like negative thoughts that I had about myself and my writing because I'd never really shared it. And I just had to like allow myself to write it. And I think the way I was able to overcome that was saying, but you know, I feel like I have like this like unique angle that I could go with a story. And I think for any writer out there, you know, there's always, I don't think publishing does it. Well, they might. The whole, like, there could only be one. So it's like, oh, we already have this book, so we don't need another one. I'm sure that's still happening in publishing.
I think so.
Yeah. Like, now that I say it out loud. I'm like, well, who are you kidding? I'm trying to be optimistic. But
no, I get that. And I hope so as well, too.
Yeah, but I do think that what a lot of aspiring writers can take is that your lens, and you hear it, like your lens is unique, right? Yeah. There are so many romances out there. There were stories that I worked on that were Black stories, that were stories about two teenagers falling in love. But I had never seen like these small details. And so by adding those small details into my story, it made my story a unique story, you know? And so that was what I had to like kind of psych myself into believing. Like there is something here that you can bring to all these collection of books that are slightly different than what else is out there, and like just put it out there and see what happens. So yeah, that was but it was a long process. Like I tried to apply for my MFA, and then I got into programs, and I'm just like, I don't feel like giving anybody any more money, you know, like
so much money and time.
So much money and time. And so yeah, I just kept going back and forth about what what was it, when and how, and all of those things. And I had to just at some point take the leap.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you worked with all of these YA authors, right? Which is the demographic that you were wanting to get into. And you would say things like, I can never write like this, or how am I going to write like this? How did you keep yourself encouraged to achieve this dream while helping so many others achieve theirs?
Man. So there's a story that I tell a lot to teenagers. But when I was 25, I lost like my best friend, kind of like my female soulmate, if you will, like just someone who was incredibly important to me. She had cancer since she was very young. And so I think her spirit was very much a spirit of like, we gotta live it up, like in a way that I don't think I've ever. It's a kind of spirit that is in a certain type of person. I think when a lot of people are confronting death, they obviously feel that way. But to know someone who feels that way at like 9 is a very trippy experience. And so it grew me up in a lot of ways because I am witnessing, and she also, she lost her leg, and so she was disabled. And so I'm dealing with someone who's a friend of mine who has like these larger than life conversations in her head about like her own life. And she was a person up until the very end. She was living the life that she wanted to live before she passed away. And so that life was living in California. She was in a music school. And she was inspired because I went to Howard, and she was like, I'm trying to get out, girl. What should I do? But I think experiencing that, I lost her, and I literally got a phone call while I was working at one of the publishing companies that I was working at. Like I had to go in an office that was empty and like have my father tell me that my friend passed away. And so that really shifted everything because I'm like, we weren't even promised to have her for as long as we had her. And then we had her, and it was like, oh, she's gonna live to old age. And so to have that sort of like taken from me, it just made me realize like, yo, life is not promised to anyone. And then COVID happened, and I was working on the book, stopped, and then COVID happened. And that was another moment where I was just like, Ebony, if you don't write this book, like you might not even be here for it. And so I think both of those experiences like just kept pushing me along, like, yo, don't get it twisted. you just because you want to do this thing doesn't mean it's going to happen. Like you actually have to put in the work to make it happen.
I think that's such a specific story. And as I was listening to you, I'm thinking about grief and the many layers that we have to face in all aspects of our lives. And my first question was like, what would your best friend think of you today?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. So the funniest part about this is Danny, cynical Danny, was very much me. Cynical Ebony I was not with it. But I had a lot of people in my life who just love. And so it showed that I love too. It was just the way I expressed love was I expressed love to the people I cared for. But like the concept of like, oh, falling in love with this guy and like him sleeping, I was just like, whatever. My friend Nisha was a total opposite because she, didn't know how long she was going to be on this earth.
So she was in a constant state of love.
She was, constantly. And she just wanted it so bad. So like even the first chapter, that's actually the real version of that chapter. The first chapter is kind of plucked from me and my mother. Like this actually would be something me and her would do, be like watching these movies. And I'm like, oh my God, Ma. But also it was something that me and Nisha would do. Like I just would watch these movies and she'd be like 11, like, girl, you better take them back. And I'm like, girl, we are 11. What are you talking about? And then I was always the one giving advice, like Prince in some ways. So I think if she was alive, she would be losing it at the fact that her cynical friend is like writing romance.
Did you know that you wanted to focus on romance?
No.
Oh.
No.
When did it switch for you?
I think it just switched into adulthood. I don't know. I had read so many different types of books, and I was trying to figure out like what is the story that I wanted to tell. And it always came back to love. And I think because, you know, we are very blessed and fortunate to have someone like Bell Hooks. I was able to see that like this is something you can write about. This is something that can be revolutionary. And also this is something that can be helpful. And so in thinking about like the advice that I would give to family and friends about like their relationships, I realized that like this is like very like this is incredibly important information. Like the person you choose to be with, whether it's for a few months or like for the rest of your life, can change the trajectory of your life if they're not healthy for you. And I thought of how many of my friends and even myself, like what would have been for us to have a book that was sort of a manual in some ways of like the ways in which love can be healthy and when they are not, how that could have helped us and shaped our lives sooner. So that is why I went that route.
Wow. And I think what you said about love being something that can change our lives, right? Not in this very like fairy tale. I mean, sometimes it is fairy tale, but sometimes it's just like in a very important way, right? If we decide to embrace love, right, it can really change everything for us. How do you embrace love on a day-to-day?
You know, I think on a human level, just trying to maintain like love to people around us, to people who look like us and people who don't, you know? I try to embrace love of self, because I think that is so hard for so many people to just be able to wake up every day and be happy with the person that they're becoming.
For sure.
Like so much of Love Radio, a lot of the love that I feel, I poured out into that. And so like, you know, showing bits of my family and the people that are in my life that I care about, that's important to show that love. And also a reminder that like all this love that I'm giving, I should be receiving. And so I think that's been one of the hardest parts for me is that I've had to learn is like, you know, you can give so much love, but you got to make sure that you're getting the proper love in return. That's what I wanted to show on Love Radio. And then, I don't know, just love for life. I don't know if, I think the older we get, the more like pessimistic we get about everything. And
I mean, especially now.
I know, especially now, everything is just on fire. And also, I think it just goes to show the importance of like how precious like these moments are.
We need them.
Yeah, like in every, I think what I'm trying to do more every single day is just appreciate all of the important special moments that are happening on a day-to-day level, on an hour-by-hour level, on a minute-by-minute, because I'm able to be here and be present and be able to do this and like be safe. And those are things that are just really important to me, I think.
And I think, you know, it can be enough.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
If those are the only things that you feel great about for the day, is more than nothing. Yeah. Right. And it can change the way that you view the entire day. Right? Yeah. And I'm thinking about that in regards to a question that keeps coming to mind. Is like, you're working in publishing, you're also writing. How did you take care of yourself? How did you stay creative? I mean, before you quit, right? How did you stay creative? I mean, you mentioned having to go into an empty office to hear probably the worst news of your life, right? Like, there's so much to that in regards to workplace and the country that we live in. And I mean, that's a whole other episode.
Yeah. You know, I mean, the joke is like quitting, and it's also the truth. There was a point where I was really great at my job, and it was like, you know what happens when you're great for something, you're rewarded by getting more work, right? And so I kept getting more work, but I'm also still trying to like maintain the work that I need to do. I'm also tasked with working with a lot of like big authors, whereas a lot of times that would sort of be passed on to other people because, oh, Ebony, but you're so good at this. Can you do this and that, right? And I just realized that like I couldn't sustain this way. Like I felt it. Like and it's COVID. And so I'm having so many different emotions. At first it's like, yo, what is publishing? Why are we doing this? Like it's a global pandemic. Right. Like what are we doing here? Like this feels pointless. Why am I marketing this book? You know what I mean? People are dying. So there's that. then you realize, oh, like we're all inside, and actually these books are helping people like cope. So that makes me feel better, right?
Yeah.
Then we're having like George Floyd happening, and I'm just like laid out. Like, I can't believe you guys are asking me to do anything right now.
One of the worst weeks, I think, in work for so many of us.
Yes. And so I'm having all these moments, but I'm just finding myself, even though I'm home, like I'm at the computer all day and all night, and I'm working through the weekends, and I'm just like, you know, record numbers are across the board. Everybody is making money, and it's just like, at what cost though, you know? And that was when I really had a moment of like, I think it was also why it helped me to stay creative, because I'm like, Ebony, this actually might be a shot for you to take a break. And that's what I kept saying. Like, that's what I keep talking about, the sabbatical, and people were laughing at me, but it was like my way to psych myself into saying like, you could potentially
come back.
Yeah, exactly. You could potentially be a full-time writer for like a couple months, and you might have to come back, or maybe a couple years you might have to come back, or maybe you just stay out the game, you know, like, and you find a different way to do publishing that doesn't have to necessarily be on the inside.
Yeah.
And so I think just the burnout completely was the thing that made me realize, like, again, like I said, I didn't know if I was going to be able to write, if I was going to be here.
Yeah.
And then once I realized that work was just not helping whatsoever with my mental health, I moved into another job. And so my last job was working with I was working on the Obama properties, and then I quit after a year of doing that. And I just realized I'm giving so much to this work, but at this point, I just need to give a little bit more to myself. And so, I think being creative was just saying like, I want to do the thing, so let me make sure I do the thing. Yeah.
It's so interesting that you kind of relied on creativity to help you with your burnout, when I think a lot of people often experience like a significant decrease in creativity when they're in the throes of burnout.
Well, I think one of the ways that I was able to be creative with Love Radio in particular was because I was seeing like, it was interesting. I'm seeing like the news. I'm seeing what's happening to people across the world. I'm seeing what's happening on my timelines with people from New York versus people from Detroit. And what was interesting to me about that was a lot of my New York friends are like transplants, right? So a lot of them come for work. They have access to health care. They're good.
Right.
But in Detroit, I'm seeing like family and friends. And people are dying. Like, and it's just a stark difference. Like, there were a few like great uncles and stuff in my family who passed away. We assume it's probably from COVID, but it's not like they're going to, the hospitals are going to check or anything. Like, they're not going to give us that information. And so, again, it was me just being reminded of, like, how things are starkly different from different communities. And Detroit was once again having this negative, like, smear on the city with, like, so many people dying from COVID without access to health. You know what I mean? Proper health care. But also, it just, that sort of kind of like reminded me of just in general seeing like Detroit growing up in the media.
Yeah.
And there was always a negative connotation. And so I think what helped me creatively was pouring all of this love into this story and just kind of like flipping this narrative of like the city only having these negative aspects or whatever.
Yeah. I feel like when you grow up somewhere, right? Of course, every place has its good and its bad. But when people are only seeing the bad, you take it personal.
Yeah.
You're like, what about all these different things and memories and all the good in it too?
Yeah.
So to know that you were able to take such a negative situation and have this experience where you're able to see the city from your eyes and pour love into it, I think to me sounded really healing.
Yeah, it was helpful. And I think the other thing too that I was even working through as I was writing it is because my parents have been divorced for as long as I can remember. And I always swapped. So it's like when I was with my father for the summers and I was with my mother for the school year. And so I was with my mother for the most part. And I ended up moving to high school to be with my dad for most of high school. And then I would be back in Detroit for the summers.
Okay.
And then...
Which I'm assuming were fun.
What?
The Detroit in the summers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I was in Vegas, and I'm in Vegas in a predominantly white school at the time. And it was just a very like trippy experience being in honors classes and teachers and principals not feeling like you should be there.
Why is that a norm?
I don't know.
Why is that?
You know, that's a whole nother conversation.
It is.
But I had a teacher who was like, I can tell you're so over all this. You need to go to HBCU. And so that is what she literally, like, she wouldn't let it go. And then I ended up going to DC and going to Howard and seeing the campus and being like, yeah, she's right, I'm home. So that's when I went to Howard. Yeah. But I was sort of playing with this idea of like, but I left, you know what I mean? And it was like, why do I have this guilt for
another very real experience?
Exactly, leaving. Yeah. And so I think writing through Danny, like, character and her arc and like wanting to leave and the reasons she wanted to leave, like, was really helpful even for me, and just kind of figuring out like some of the like decisions I had to make as a teenager, and why I made the choices that I made for myself. Yeah.
And it paved the way for the life that you're able to live
exactly.
now. So it's not all bad.
Yeah. I knew I was doing something. I just, you know, when you're young, you don't know what.
Yeah. And I think that's what I loved about Love Radio is like they didn't really know what the future held, but they still allowed themselves to be present. Yeah. And to enjoy each other. And to also try to navigate through the things that were difficult for them. And as I'm thinking, in regards to that, I'm assuming it was difficult for you to quit your job in pursuing writing.
Absolutely.
How did you stay grounded in that decision?
So when I quit, it was actually because, I mean, so I was kind of a mess. That's the short answer. It was, in addition to just like dealing with other stuff, I was actually dealing with someone close to me having a health issue. And I went to like be with her as she was navigating the medical system as a woman of color. It was difficult. And that's also a whole nother story. But what I realized in the moment, which was like, there was a concern for her health. And I'm like, you know, this is one of those moments where I'm really strongly considering leaving my job anyway. And this is where I could be present and available for her. You know what I mean?
So that's 2 moments in your life then that you've had these feelings of like being in between where something kind of pushes you.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
Wow.
And so it was something I had thought about, like maybe I'll do it in a month. The other thing that was happening was I knew Mrs. Obama's book was coming out. And what I also didn't want to do, because that's the professional side of me, is like, I don't want to be in the middle of a campaign with like Mrs. O. And
right, like it's not something small.
I'm going to peace out because
hope it goes well.
Yeah, but also I want to promote my book. Like it just seemed like so messy. So I'm like, you know, this is probably a good opportunity to do this so that it gives them time to find someone else, so that she, you know, it's a big campaign. There'll be someone there for her. It just felt like the right moment. And when that whole situation happened, I just felt very stressed. And I'm like, you know what? I need to do this for myself too. And so, yeah, that Monday, it was like all this stuff was happening over the course of that weekend. And that Monday, I literally came on a Zoom call and I just told my boss, I was like, you know what? I'm making this decision. Yeah.
So to me, with that, now you have more time to focus on writing, right? But what has writing provided for you now that it's been your main focus?
I mean, honestly, it's just given me the opportunity to explore creatively different things I just want to pursue. And it's not even just writing, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like there are a lot of ideas that I have in terms of like what would a career look like outside of publishing if I'm still doing publishing. So I've been like slowly doing marketing consulting. Okay. And it's a very slow road because I'm a one-woman show, you can't do it all. I have deadlines. Like writing is sort of my bread and butter right now. So that takes precedent over any sort of like marketing consulting gigs. But I'm looking at like, what can I do to help improve literacy in general? Like it doesn't need to just be with authors. Like what are other ways in which I can get paid to do this? Because I can't do this stuff for free, but also like help and support and build community. So it's what I'm doing also is kind of like building an infrastructure to figure out what I want to do. But what's been cool is like, I've just been able to pursue things creatively. And it's just things that nobody knows about. They kind of like happen and then they end. But for me, it's like I'm learning like the things that I want to learn to figure out like how I'm going to navigate the next phase of my life. So it's been really cool.
For sure. And I hope you don't take this in a negative way, but to me, it seems like in leaving your job, it's given you the permission to play and to see yourself in different roles and in different spaces. And it's allowed you to grow in a way of imagining a different life for yourself.
Yeah, I had to, I mean, so much of corporate culture is unlearning corporate culture. Yeah. And so I spent a bit of my time just like trying to do that. I remember talking to an author, Christine Platt, and I was talking to her about my to-do list. And I was like, I have so many things every single day. And she's like, Ebony, you don't work for the man anymore, girl. What are you doing? Like why do you have
this schedule?
Yeah, why do you have this long to-do list?
Right.
Cut it. You have permission to cut it. And I'm just like, you're right. And so then I started using this journal that she put me onto. It's like, you have 5 tasks. Wow. But then I began to realize, like, look at how like hardy these tasks are. You know what I mean? Like I'm really pouring like
so much of your mind.
Yeah, exactly. Into it. And it's producing the thing that I wanted to produce and sometimes even greater. So this is exactly what I want. Yeah. But I'm just so used to you got like 50 things to do every single day that you're just overproducing. And that's literally how my burnout starts. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's not just you. That's
so many people. Exactly. So across so many industries. Yeah. So that has been like beautiful and recognizing that as a privilege just to be able to like not like even meetings, like the fact that I don't have to be on meetings all day, all freaking day. And then you have to figure out how you're going to do your work afterwards. Just and those things. Exactly.
And, drink water. And, like,
exactly. Yeah, maybe go for a walk. If that happens,
if you can.
Most of the time doesn't happen, yeah. Maybe before the sun goes down,
you know? Because then it gets a little spooky at night. You can't walk out at night by yourself. Day's over, go to sleep and do it again the next day.
Yeah.
And to me, you're describing the productivity circus that we're all a part of. So what does productivity for you look like right now that you are the boss of your schedule in some ways, of course, outside of deadlines? But
I mean, outside of deadlines, it is also just I'm trying to like, read more, which sometimes with deadlines that gets a little bit harder. And also, I think there have been a lot of ideas that I've just had in my head that I've never even tried to like flesh out. And so it's just been really cool doing that part, honestly. And it's one of those things where some of the ideas, they become a little bit more fully formed. I'm like, okay, like I might be able to do something with this. Others, it's like, okay, I'm going to park this for now because there's more I want to do and I know I'm not ready yet. And so that's been really cool too.
Yeah. So it seems like you've been able to learn more about your limits and where your focus is and how to kind of wield your energy on a day-to-day basis to help you achieve the things that you need to.
Most definitely. And the other thing is just trying to learn craft, this is a self-taught thing. And so the goal, the hope is for every book to be better and different, but that also means like trying to work on things that are difficult, even more difficult than they were before. So trying to stretch myself in that way too.
Yeah. What does that practice of stretching yourself look like from the lens of being self-taught? How do you quiet any sort of maybe negativity that I'm assuming as a person will come up, right?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think having people around you that you can trust too is incredibly important. Yeah. And so whether it's bouncing the idea, the concept off of them to see what they think. One of the things that someone told me recently as they were reading the next draft of my book was like, you are handling this with care, extreme care. And I am reading this slowly because I'm feeling seen in ways I didn't expect to. And so that to me is, it's like it's the goal, And so I think when I come to a project, even with Love Radio, Prince's mother has MS. Like I said, Nisha, my friend, was someone who had a physical disability that is, seen, but like the invisible disabilities, when you present yourself as someone who can look fine.
Mm-hmm.
And so people assume that you know what I mean, that there's nothing going on.
Mm-hmm.
That is a little bit different. That it's a different conversation. And so I have a very close person in my life who has lupus, and my cousin has MS. And so I'm able to really talk to them about like the day to day, how does that look, and also see it, not just talk about it, but so much of, being an ally is just being able to recognize when they need you to do something without saying that they need you to do it, know, or when they need you to fall back because they got this. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned about someone saying that they see themselves in your writing, I can assume is not only reassuring, but it reminds you of maybe the purpose of the work that you're doing, right? It's a way to ground you in it as well too.
Most definitely. Yeah, most definitely. I wouldn't want it any other way. And the intent in any story that I write is not to bash anyone or put any person or community or whatever down. It's really to get to the truth of the matter, you know? And so I'm trying to make sure I'm always handling with care. I get a little obsessive about it. And I think it's important.
I don't think obsession is even a part of the equation there. I think in talking about any demographic, it's important to be, like you said, almost obsessively honest and open with it, and the research that you're doing and the care and the intention that you put into it.
Absolutely.
Those are all the things that, to me, as a reader, right, is what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
When I'm seeing these different stories that may not resonate with me, but, like I have a family member that has MS too. And I'm like, okay, look at them represented in this book, right? But I do think what you mentioned is important, especially in the world that we live in now in regards to social media. Sometimes people don't see that intention, or they don't take that care, and it can be harmful.
Yeah, most definitely.
And I know you saw it while you were working, right? And I'm curious, what is it like to be on the other side now, to be on socials, and to have a book on something like Goodreads and Storygraph? Like, how do you navigate that space before and now?
Yeah. So I will say I was able to see the good and bad of an author's career sort of take flight, and whether the reviews are rightfully bad, or bad rightfully so or not. Just seeing how it can impact an author.
Yeah, you got the first-hand close up.
Yeah. And so I'm seeing creatives with all different types of personalities, managing this in all different types of ways. And one of the things that I did quietly as a marketer to those who trusted me is like, I would have sidebar conversations with them about things, just to make them feel supported. But I think for me, it taught me a lot about like the things that I was not going to do. And so there was a real fear of publishing this book, obviously. But then I've had early readers, and my beta readers are readers that I've trusted for years and years.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
And once they told me, Ebony, like, girl, shut it down. This is fine. Like, this is amazing. We love it. Like, it wasn't even just that they told me that they liked it. It was like, I love it. I actually love this book. That's what made me realize, okay, girl, you're good. You gotta cut all of that out. So after that, I realized that like, if I am touching the people that I'm touching, then I am going to find my group of people. And so even if this book is not for everybody, there are going to be readers that vibe with it. And those are going to be my readers. And that's it, you know? And everybody else, I'll just have to like find a way to silence the noise. And I think what I was surprised by was, because I was mentally preparing for so much negativity, and this is what I do in general.
I was like, why?
No, I think it's just a thing that you just want to be pleasantly surprised. It's like, let me not psych myself out.
That's real.
A lot of the accolades and stuff I got, I was just like, so like, it was one of those things where if you see me, you're like, oh my God. Cause it was like, oh my God, this is really happening. I can't believe this. Like, girl, I didn't think I was going to do all this. I allow myself to like, not get my expectations too high.
They were pretty
neutral. I think neutral is the best way to say it. And so to have the reactions has actually just been beautiful because I'm like, yo, I'm shocked that I got all this. So it's I'm very like grateful for it all. And I think that's kind of how I move to keep me sane, if I'm being real. And I also think that, you know, Ebony 5, 10, 15 years ago wouldn't have been able to handle it in this way. Why? And so I think, I think being younger, you can be a bit more insecure. I'm very much an introvert. And so there's a lot of things that I had to also just be okay with, like just being okay in the spotlight.
And I was going to say, you're used to being
I'm comfortable in the back. Very cozy. Give me a little blanket and I'm good. A little book.
That's all you need. A little beverage.
And I'm great. So it was hard being at the front of things, but I also... And I think that was a big part of another reason I psyched myself out why I didn't want to necessarily write, because I'm like, oh no, I got to talk. Yeah. You want me to talk about my stuff? Many talks. Like I do this a lot of times. I can't do this. So yeah, I think all those things kind of had me not want to do it for a bit. So it's been great to be on this side and get the love that I've been getting.
Do you feel like your confidence has grown in any way in your writing or even as a person now that you have done this big scary thing, which is to put a piece of you out in the world?
I mean, as a person, most definitely. I have grown so much from this book, even just writing it writing it on my own, like even before the book published. I learned a lot about myself and grew a lot in my confidence. I get when writers say, like, writers who have just constantly been putting out hit after hit, and they're still like, it never goes away. When you turn in that next book, you're always like, what the hell am I doing? Right. Like, have I made the right decision? Who do I think I am? And so I absolutely can see that being a thing because I'm working on stuff and I'm just like, all right, girl. It's like the some of the same feelings of like, oh my God, are people gonna like vibe with this one? Like those feelings never go away, I would say.
And again, you've been on the other side. You've seen authors go through this again with their second book too. So in some ways I can feel like maybe there's a sense of comfort and like, okay, I kind of know what to expect, but it's me. This is me now.
The comfort is, that's like the only comfort. It's you don't feel comfortable until the book is out and people are like,
because there's nothing you can do then.
Yeah, exactly. So that's always the thing. Will people like this book or not? Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad that you said that you're an introvert because same. It took me a long time to realize I was one. I think I was just cosplaying being an extrovert. And I was like, girl, you're so tired all the time. I wonder why.
I love that I like accepted it from jump.
I wish I did.
Ebony, your battery is on E, girl. Go home.
Like, you're done.
And be up away for a little bit. Yeah.
But I'm wondering, is there any encouragement or words of advice that you would give to someone who is introverted or maybe just fearful of entering into the field of publishing or writing?
I mean, first and foremost, I want to start with the writing because I think there's so many elements of being an author. You know, there's like the social media part of it. There is like the little bit of like being known part of it that I think people get caught up in the other parts and they forget about the biggest thing, which is you got to write. Like, if you're doing this, at the end of the day, if Meta shuts down tomorrow, you know what I mean? If we have no methods of like getting our faces online, which we know that's not going to happen, but you get what I'm saying. I do. Writing still has to be there. Yeah. And so much of the writing is being by yourself. And so if you cannot sit with yourself for hours on end,
it's going to be tough.
But so the first and most important piece of advice I think is the writing. And that is, give yourself the freedom to write just freely. Like, just write it. Like, write it messy. Write free thought. Write whatever is in your head. Just get it out. So much of what I was concerned about was writing a book that I'm like, it's just not there yet. And it's not going to be there. That's what an editor is for. And I will say one of the things that publishing did teach me was I'm reading books on acquisition, which is like a book they're trying to get a book acquired to be published. So I was in those acquisition meetings, me and many other people, and just kind of being one of the voices to say we should publish this because of X, Y, or Z, or we shouldn't. But seeing books that we acquired in their first draft and then reading it again after it's been edited, you just see the difference. You see what the editor was able to pull out of the author. And it's not necessarily like, oh, like line by line. It's just like plot points and like taking things out and putting things back in. And you just really can appreciate a really good editor, just like you can appreciate a really good therapist, you know, like it's game changing when you get a good one.
It is.
And so that's what the beauty of being published is you'll have that person to like get your writing to the next level, but you got to get it out there in order for that to happen. So you have to just write it. So
I can imagine there's safety in that also, knowing like this isn't going to be your final draft.
Yeah.
You will have help.
You will,
along
exactly.
the way.
You will be able to tweak it, and don't tweak it in the moment. Just write it, like get it out. And then even from that, you can write it and then you can tweak it yourself, but don't tweak it while you're writing it because you're never going to finish it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very good.
And my little way to psych myself out was, if this is horrible when I finish, I can put it in the trash on my MacBook and no one is going to see it. Like so yeah, maybe don't tell anybody that you're writing, just write it. And then you're like, after you finish, you're like, you know what? This kind of popping, you know, I think I'm ready to share it with the world.
Yeah. I feel like you said, no one's going to see it. Right?
No one's going to see it until...
And that, I think, is what stops people in general, the fear of maybe seeing themselves on the page, right?
Yeah, that's the real.
Know about that.
But you know what? I think that's such a good point, Wale. I think that's really what it boils down to. Is so much of writing is you are questioning things that, even if this book is not about you, it is about you in some way. These are questions that are coming from your mind. You know, these are questions that you have about yourself and the world around you. And so it's going to unearth some things that might make you uncomfortable about yourself or the world around you. Yeah. And I absolutely think that some of the best writers, like the lessons that they take from their stories are just, you know, you can tell the difference between the writers who are really ready, like willing to go there through the story, and also just like how they talk about it versus the ones who aren't.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
It's not something that I've thought about in that way, but you're right. I can name so many books that you just mentioned where I'm like, they put their whole mind, body, and soul to this book to the point where if I were to see it and be like, how did you?
Yeah.
Because I couldn't.
And I think it affects some writers. Like, there's a editor at One World, Nicole Counts, and she talks about that. I think she wrote something in Publishers Weekly about it, just how writing and putting yourself out there, what it can actually like do to the body if you're not taking care of yourself, like you say. And so sometimes authors go into a rabbit hole of like what they're unearthing, that it can be toxic for them. And so you have to be very careful about how you do it. But yeah, I absolutely agree.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what I noticed as well too. Some of the books that I've read and even author sessions and talks that I've been to, some of the books will be fiction, right? But you know, the plots and the themes of the book are so heavy. And I'm like, every day you're like traveling and you're coming to talk about these heavy themes. Like, what do you do behind the scenes, right? How do you take care of yourself? How do you separate yourself from the work? You know, is that something that you keep in mind for yourself as well too? Yeah,
like separating myself from the work. I think so. I mean, I think there's a part of me, I can't speak for everybody, where I'm always thinking of the work a little bit, but it's just like inspiration in small things. And for me, one of the things that I notice is like while I'm writing, like throughout the day, obviously another idea will come. And so you're kind of just like journaling or jotting things down that you can come back to the next day. But it's also a reason why I wrote romance too, right? Because I knew that I wanted to be able to add heavy elements into stories without it just being
all heavy
all the time. I don't necessarily know if I could be a writer if like that was the work that I did. And that's just me. I don't think I have it in me to do that type of work.
I mean, knowing yourself is important to do any of the work, right? And I feel like it's difficult because we do live in a world that is so tragic, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
So to read things that are also only in a way heavy or just tragedy focused does take a toll on the reader as well too. You know? And I think finding that balance of talking about things that are real, but also adding elements of love creates a sense of hope that for me, I'm able to then put out into the world as well too. I'm able to feel a little bit more hopeful after than I did before.
And that's what I love about YA, because that's kind of, no, it is a thing. And so it's like it with anything that if I decided to, you know, go into a different route, I don't think I'm ever writing fantasy, but let me never say never.
Right. You never know.
But right now I don't have the world building capabilities. So I don't think that's in my cards, but it's still hope, you know, you're still getting hope at the end of it. And so it's why I wanted to market in YA, and I think is a big reason why I came into writing YA too. Yeah.
A question that I always, I'm really glad that you said what you said about YA before I jump into that. I love YA for that reason.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of discourse that happens every year about authors who have started to write YA for adults instead of for young adults. And I find that to be interesting. Do you have any insight on that?
I mean, no insight. I do think that for some authors, they might feel like there's a disconnect between them and the young adult reader. So that might be some of it. I like the idea of kind of just doing both if that presents itself. But right now, I think I'm definitely more YA focused than adult. But I love talking to teens too.
Me too.
So I think for me, as in terms of my reader, I enjoy the YA reader for sure.
Yeah. What would young Ebony think of Love Radio and the life that you're living right now?
I think young Ebony would be really proud. I think she would be. I'm trying to see. I don't necessarily know if I would say shocked. Because when I was little, like 8, I was stapling booklets for my parents to read. Like I was always sharing stories. I only was sharing really with my parents because I was, again, a shy girl.
Yeah.
So I wasn't out here sharing stories with a lot of people, but that was something that was always a part of me. And so
it wasn't a surprise for them either to see.
Oh, for my parents, not at all.
Wow.
But I do think that one of the things that my dad says is he was like, when you were little, like your biggest hurdle was actually yourself.
Okay, Dad.
I know. He be coming with the, with
the real advice. I thought we were just having a casual conversation.
Well, I mean, you are a therapist, so we were going to go there.
But for me, as a person, if my dad were to say, I'm like, I didn't come for that. Thank you so much. But you're right.
It was very, I mean, these are the conversations that we have, and it was really helpful and insightful and true. Because high school and college and like after I graduated was me having a conversation with myself, negotiating whether or not I could be a published writer.
Wow.
And so it was already set. Like as a kid, that was something I absolutely wanted to do.
And like we said, you were pushed into these decisions, right, by outside experiences and things that were happening to you.
But I think there was a period where I'm like, I don't know if I have it in me. So I think young Ebony would be very proud, and also like, girl, like, of course, like I could have told you, I could have told you were going to do this. A little
irritated too.
A little irritated that like it took me so long to like do the thing that young Ebony knew I was meant to do, I guess.
I mean, wow, what a full circle moment, you know, and I'm glad that you were able to, with your life experiences and the people around you, the support that you have, to kind of step out of your own way, do the scary thing that's put you in this space where I'm assuming you feel like you're in your purpose and you're walking your purpose, which is what I think we're all ultimately trying to do.
Absolutely. I mean, this experience has been such a beautiful one, and I don't take any of it for granted. I don't know. It's like even now, like just
up and down.
Thinking about it. No, I mean it's been incredible. And so I definitely feel that this is like a part of the thing that I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so I'm thankful that I just kept pushing myself to try to do it. Yeah.
For sure. And when I said up and down, I think what I meant by that is that, like, when you're starting to see a path for yourself, right? You kind of want to start to jump into all of these different things. So then you have to be like, whoa. Yeah. Let's refocus. Like, I'm going to get there. Yeah. But I don't need to try to, like, jump to it right now. And that, to me, as someone that's so, like, trying to be in a space of hope, I'm like, dang, I have to wait. All right, I guess I'll wait.
Yeah, I get it. I like, it's been interesting because I have this experience on the other side coming into being an author. I'm starting from scratch. And when you talk about the whole waiting game, for me, I think I'm very, like, set in this track. Like, I feel okay about the fact that, like, I am trying to become a better author day by day and writer. And so I'm kind of on this patient track with myself. Yeah. And I think there is always a rush to do things. And for me, that's just not how I roll. Like, I love that. I like to take my time with stuff if I need to. And so I'm allowing myself to do that. And I'm allowing myself to be myself in this process, which I don't think a lot of people do or get to do. And it's something I had to learn, like, even at work. It's like, oh, we need a response on this email ASAP. And it's just like, but you guys want me to fix 3 fires. Right. So let me tell you what needs to happen. I need to think about this. So let me sit with this for an evening and get back to you in the morning because it's not something that needs to happen right now. Yeah. And once I gave myself permission to do that on the corporate level, I was like, okay, girl, don't put out a crappy book. So you need to sit with this. Yeah. And then when it's time, you can let it go, you know?
Yeah. That's such a big lesson on patience. And I hope that your continued success is also met with a space of feeling grounded in the work that you've done, but who you are as a person. I'm really looking forward to all of the other books, no pressure, that you end up writing. And I think you left me feeling very encouraged to maybe step out of my own way too. So thank you so much.
Oh, I love this. We're going to talk about this.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was amazing.
Yeah, we were way over. I'm so sorry.